I think it's everywhere except TikTok still, but we're working on it. And I'm not quite centered. How is this gonna work? I gotta be more that way or that way? This way. I don't know. We'll figure it out. I'm trying to watch it on Instagram to make sure I'm in the center, but it's delayed, so it's basically impossible to know. Maybe there. That's good. Today's talk is gonna be on burnout. So I'm gonna put a link. I think I can send it in chat here. So this is a newsletter article I did. Burnout is not unique to my newsletter article or anything like that. So I want to talk about burnout. I think it's really important. And one sec, I just want to make sure YouTube is working here because that's going to be tomorrow's video that goes up. Just one more second here. Okay. It says excellent connection, but then there was no video. Okay, so couple things. Hopefully my mic sounds good. I've had a nightmare of a time for the past like over 10 months recording stuff. It turns out it has nothing to do with my microphone. It's entirely my laptop computer, which has been infuriating. So I finally just switched everything over. I have this gaming machine that's a few years older, and I said, hey, like, there's a lot of similarities with doing video editing and recording and stuff in video games. I might as well set this thing up to do my streaming and my video recording. So that's the plan. And of course, first time I tried it, the mic sounded a lot better. So hopefully it's coming through pretty good. So as usual with these, I'm going to be talking about a topic, so it's going to be burnout, but I do want to make sure that if you are watching live that you can ask questions and that kind of stuff, right? It's entirely meant to be for you. So if you have questions, please type them in the chat. I will be watching. Hello, Maria. Looks like LinkedIn chat is working. Awesome topic today. Yes, I think burnout's incredibly important. So like I was just saying, right, if people have thoughts, comments, add them to the chat. I'll try to read them out and answer them as I'm going. But I'm kind of going to go in the order that I wrote about it. So kind of want to talk about like what burnout is, like what signs there are, because I think when people talk about burnout, there's usually like it's like the most common kind of way that we would describe it, right? Is like pretty common for people to define it. Like it's, being stressed out, being exhausted. Like there's very common things that we associate with burnout. And I want to look at a couple of variations of them because I think that's important. I'll talk about my own experience because I think it's a little bit unique. And it's one of the reasons I like to talk about it. Not because I just want to tell you my story over and over, but more like I thought I was immune to burnout. And I want to share that because I think it's a helpful story to go over. So we'll do that. And then we'll talk about different things that you can try to work on for addressing burnout. And when it comes to guidance around that, it's really like it's going to be so situational. I can't just give you blanket advice. It's going to apply to every person, every software engineer, right? It's going to be situational for sure. But we will go through that, so hopefully it's helpful for folks. And yeah. So with that said, well, what is burnout, right? So I would say the way that I define it is like this feeling of being overwhelmed, exhausted, irate. Oh, awesome! It looks like the Instagram chat is actually working. Hello on Instagram. I don't think I've seen the chat messages come in before, so this is cool. But yeah, like generally an overwhelming feel of exhaustion. You might notice that you're irate at work, you're disengaged. A way that I like to kind of define it, and I know it's not the same thing, so please don't conflate that I am saying it's the same thing, but I kind of think about it like depression for work, right? Like depression, for example, is not just being sad, right? There's a lot more to depression than just feelings of being sad. And similarly with burnout, I think that it's more than just being tired or more than just not liking something. There's other layers to burnout that exist beyond just like this simple I don't like this project or this week was hard. So I think that that's important to kind of call out. And from there, if we start thinking about these things, right? So like what is that going to mean if you're burnt out? Because this is important to think about burnout, right? I'm just some guy on the internet telling you about burnout. You probably heard about it before, but why does that matter? And it matters because not only is it going to have negative effects on you at work, but also in your personal life, depending on, you know, how long you let it go unchecked. So what does it look like when you're going through burnout? Well, I mentioned you're going to have feelings of being exhausted. You're going to be disengaged, irate. Think about how that plays out when you're at work to start with, because this is really centered around software engineers. And we'll start with the work part because I think that's a pretty big aspect for most software engineers is thinking about their career, thinking about their work. And if you're noticing like that you're disengaged in projects that you're working on, like how do you think that that's going to translate into your performance on those projects? Right? Like probably not very well. And that's not to say that, you know, it's a rule like you're disengaged therefore you will do poorly on them, but more likely than not you're disengaged, you're going to be like, you know, you're not excited to go do the work, you'll drag your feet a little bit, maybe procrastinate on things, you might not put in your best effort, the best quality deliverables because you're just not into it. Again, that's not to say that it's impossible, it's just that it's going to feel like there's a lot of resistance, right? I don't like this project, I could be working on something else, this project sucks. But this is only the one aspect of the burnout part, right? Like you're noticing I don't like this project, right? There's more going on, but you're disengaged with the work you're doing. You're going to have other people start to notice this as well, right? So your manager might start to notice that. Hello on Instagram. I see more messages coming in. They're not coming into the shared part though. Let me just move this over so um, I can make sure that I'm addressing you guys if you have questions, because that's not really going to be fair if I'm watching one chat and then Instagram people have questions and I just totally ignore them. So it's in a better spot now. So hello on Instagram. Thanks for joining. So when we think about our ability to do well at work, when we're experiencing burnout, it's going to be very likely poorer quality work. You're going to have people start to notice it. I mentioned one of the things that you might start experiencing is that you're being irate. And what I mean by that is like you might start to have a shorter temper, right? You might feel frustrated when you're working with other people. You could think about you're putting up pull requests and you know, you have people that are commenting on your pull requests and suddenly you're like, nope, like I don't want to deal with this. And it's like the most simple things, but this is kind of building up over time. It's not just you're having a bad day. Your personality regarding this stuff is starting to change over time. So Maria said on the LinkedIn chat, I try to be attentive to the signs when I start feeling exhausted, annoyed, unaccomplished, unappreciated. Absolutely, right? So we will get into some of this is like the next part coming up is like these signs that we can look for. So when it comes to work, right, there's a whole bunch of sort of negative consequences that come with being burnt out. And in my opinion, it starts to feel like a vicious cycle because not only are you is your personality regarding things starting to change, like I mentioned, being irate, you're disengaged because the projects are, you know, you're burnt out from working on them. You have all of these negative things that start to make it so that work becomes more challenging. You're disengaged with it. And then as a result, like your performance starts to drop. And then like you're kind of just going down, like I said, like it's a bit of a vicious cycle. It's a bit of a negative spiral to happen. So we want to get out of that. Now, it's not just work, right? So these types of things often bleed over to your personal life as well, which is another reason why this is so important to talk about, because we want to make sure, and it's not just specific to software engineers, right? We want to have a good work-life balance. We're going to be doing this stuff for a large majority of our lives. So we want to make sure that we're enjoying ourselves. We have to work hard. It makes sense. There's going to be a lot of challenges to go through, but we don't want to have like going through life where we're just like resenting doing work. Hello, Career Code Hindi on Instagram. Thanks for joining. So, with all that said, we start to think about how that's going to affect our personal lives, right? So you were going like the irate one, I think, is a really big one. You start to notice like you're being irate with people at work. Well, what about your significant other, right? You come home from work, or if you're working from home, you're already at home, and it's even worse because the lines start to blur even more so, and you're thinking about the interactions you're having with your partner, and you're already kind of exhausted. You started the day exhausted. You started the day fed up with people at work, not because of them in particular, but this is just like you're kind of just living through this, and it sucks. And then your partner says something, and you're already kind of on edge, and so all of these things not only build up at work, but they can have an effect on your personal life as well. So if you're thinking, hey, I haven't really had a problem at work, maybe not a big deal, like maybe think for a second that this could impact your personal life as well. Not just your significant other, this could be with friends and family as well. So keep in mind. So, kind of talking about what burnout is, sort of the effects of it. And Maria kind of started hinting at like this next part, right? Like the signs of it. So, uh, I think that, and as we get later into the talk, we'll talk about like I don't want to say necessarily just preventative measures, but even things like once you're experiencing burnout, how can you kind of steer through it, right? And one of them, this is a bit of a spoiler, but like one of the main ones that I say is like just having awareness of it. So going back to what Maria said in the chat, start to feeling exhausted, right? I think that's a big one. Exhausted, annoyed, and then she has two others here that say unaccomplished and unappreciated. I want to focus on the first two just to round them out because I've already been talking about them. But if you think about the work you're doing as a software engineer, right, it's not physically taxing. And sometimes you'll have long days working through solving hard problems and stuff like that. And you're like, man, yeah, like I feel pretty tired from going through that. Like it can be tiring. But imagine like starting your day and you're already exhausted from the problems you have to go look at. You haven't even started work yet. And you're like, I'm exhausted, like thinking about having to work on this project. Right. And it's not just one day. This is something where you're like, it just continues and builds and builds and builds. Um, and yeah, I'll come back to the comment on Instagram here about like estimations and like one thing going wrong and derailing it. I want to just kind of finish out this topic here, and I'll answer that. So the next part about feeling unaccomplished and unappreciated, these are more like I think they involve a little bit more awareness too, because sometimes the other symptoms like feeling annoyed or feeling exhausted, I feel I'm not a psychologist, but I feel like sometimes these ones are a little bit more in the forefront, right? It's probably easier for you to have awareness that you are feeling annoyed or that you're feeling exhausted. But I think it takes a little bit of introspection to kind of realize that, hey, like I am feeling maybe like unaccomplished or unappreciated. Just a little bit more effort to kind of realize, hey, maybe that's what's going on here. Like I don't know, like different levels of these types of feelings, but I think maybe a little bit more effort put in. And I absolutely agree with Maria on these. You might start saying, like, okay, I was working on this project. This is just an example. You've been working on it for months now, and you kind of feel like it's not really going anywhere. And you truly might be making progress on the project. You're making progress towards the deliverable, but you're just feeling like for what? Like there is no sense of accomplishment as you're going through it, even when you do finish it. Great, it's done, right? Unappreciated. You're going through, you're doing this work. You might start realizing like this has felt pretty crappy, but like it's maybe there's some feedback loop that's missing, right? So you might start to notice that as well. But these are all individual things, and burnout is a lot more than each one of these things on their own. But I think it's important for us to kind of address some of these individual feelings, because once you start to notice that you have a handful of them together over a prolonged period of time, this is probably an indicator that you're experiencing burnout. And I would think about it like a spectrum as well, right? Like if you start to notice it early, there are things you could do sooner to help prevent it from getting worse. Okay, before moving on, the question in chat on Instagram was, have you ever come across this? You take a requirement, then one step goes wrong, and the whole story estimate gets messed up. So absolutely, this is sort of a consequence of doing estimates, and they're estimates for a reason, right? So when we estimate things, and if you're using story points in general, it is an estimate for a reason. We don't, no one has a crystal ball, unfortunately. That would be totally awesome. If you do have one, please let me know because I would love to use it. But when it comes to estimations, the reality is you're going to be wrong. And at least from my experience, we're wrong significantly more often than we're right. So if you are struggling with that and saying, hey, we estimated things, something didn't go as planned, now the whole thing is off. Instead of just going, well, we said it was this many story points, therefore we got to, like, that's the constraint. I think that that's maybe not the best way to go about it because the reality is different than you expected. And you should, have a conversation about that if you're doing stand-up meetings. Talk about it with the team and try to pivot if it makes sense to. If you've completely derailed something, try to pivot. But this is what stand-up meetings and stuff are for. You're supposed to be able to bring these things up and make adjustments. Depending on how your team does stuff, you might say, hey, we keep the estimate, but now we understand that like this current work is out of scope or whatever. You make adjustments. But some people like to keep their estimates. If you're using story points, you keep them consistent. Other people might change them mid-sprint. You might say like, hey, we're going to carve this work out. Now it's instead of a 7 story point item, it's now we're going to take part of it, and this is a 3. We'll do part of it, and then we'll push out more work for the future. There's tons of ways to do this, but just keep in mind that story points and estimates are estimates. They will be wrong. Okay, back to burnout. So I wanted to talk about my experience with burnout because we just went through what I would consider are pretty stereotypical, traditional feelings of burnout, right? You'll have the exhaustion, the being irate, the disengaged. Maria called it like unaccomplished, unappreciated. All these sorts of feelings kind of stack up for a long period of time. So my experience with burnout's a little bit different. And like I kind of said at the beginning of this stream, I thought that I was immune to it, which sounds pretty funny in hindsight. I don't think I consciously was like, nope, burnout's never going to get me. Like I'm better or I'm different. I think it was more like being in situations where someone was saying, and I'll explain this, but someone was saying like, seems like you should be experiencing burnout. And I was like, nope, like still good to go. So the context, the story here, I worked at a startup for a long time before Microsoft. I worked there for 8 years. And this was a startup that was in the digital forensics space. And for me, I'd never done digital forensics in my life. I, graduated from university. And when I took the job at this startup, I actually talked about this on one of the streams for imposter syndrome. And I remember going into one of the first meetings with my boss, and he was asking us who knows about like file systems, like FAT32, NTFS file systems. And I just remember being like, oh no, what have I done? I know nothing about these things. And guess what we do? Digital forensics, like maybe I am an imposter. And so this job was awesome though. And the mission, I guess, is the way that I would put it. And we actually talked about this a lot at the company. The mission that we had was really about being able to help law enforcement and other investigators be able to uncover the truth. And while that seems kind of general and high level, a lot of what we did involved saving kids, which I think was, one of the main drivers. So a lot of the time that would be helping people who are doing investigations for crimes, in particular, helping catch pedophiles. And I say this honestly, I don't know if I will ever in my life do more impactful work than that. So you layer that part in where you feel like I'm having, a huge impact because even if you do, one feature, one bug fix that an investigator can use, and that helps to save a child, like to basically help catch a pedophile so they can't commit any more crimes, you're like, worth it, right? Like it doesn't matter what the cost was, like absolutely worth it. So work was always very motivating based on the mission. The people I worked with were amazing as well, right? So it was really cool to be at a startup that was like 8 people across the whole company. We were in an accelerator center. Actually, it's called the Accelerator Center in Kitchener Waterloo area back in Ontario. Small little place, and it was like, I think we were the fastest company to graduate from that program. So we got our own office in Waterloo, and you're just with people that are passionate about what they're doing. And the entire time just felt like, holy crap, it's so good to work with these people. By the way, no one's paying me to say this, so this is just a true story about my work history. Um, and we worked a lot. And I was fortunate that, like, for me, I didn't have, maybe this is unfortunate, I guess, fortunate from like a work perspective, but I didn't have a girlfriend. I had nothing else really going on. I was like, I like to play video games. I like to go to the gym, and I like to work. I love to work. And often what was happening was that I would be working and then go to take a break to play video games or something. And this is like working at home after hours. And then I would be like, why am I playing video games, or why am I coding my own stuff? Because, like, if I just do work, I know that it's going to translate into having a positive impact. I know that if I go do more work, it will literally help the company. It will help us help other people catch bad people. And I never, in the 8 years that I worked there, I never felt like I had someone being like, look, you better work late. Yeah, we had tight deadlines, but like no one ever forced me to do anything. And I would work nonstop. And I did that for almost the full 8 years I was there. And so I mentioned, hey, like someone was telling me like, hey, it seems like you should be going through burnout. So I had an awesome HR leader. Her name was Kelly Braden. And Kelly would tell me, she's like, you are working too much. You are going to burn out. And this is where I was saying, not like I thought I was special or different, but I was going like, well, I'm not. I'm not burning out. And I was thinking about all these different burnout things I talked about earlier. Am I disengaged with work? No. Am I feeling exhausted? No. In fact, I could stay up late coding for work. And I would do this sometimes. I would stay up, till midnight, 2 in the morning coding, and then roll out of bed. I lived like a, this is embarrassing. I lived like a less than 5 minute walk to work, and I would still drive there because I was like, it might rain or something. So, I would roll out of bed like right before I have to be at work, brush my teeth. Maybe not a huge breakfast eater, get to work, code, right? Like I was always working, but not exhausted, not disengaged. Did I feel appreciated? Yes. Did I feel accomplished? Yes. I had all of these things that were not burnout signals. Quite the opposite. I love what I was doing. I was very energized to do the work. How was that burnout? And I did this. I did this for months. I did it for years. So burnout for me looked different because I've experienced burnout since then multiple times. But during this part of my life and work for me, burnout looked very different. And one of the things I want to highlight, as a takeaway from this talk, right, is that, yeah, we talked about the signals of burnout. Yes, we're going to talk about some things you can try to do to navigate burnout, but I think the most dangerous thing about burnout is that it can creep up on you. And that's why I think awareness is one of the biggest things, the biggest tools that you can leverage for burnout. So if you're aware that burnout can look different and you're aware that it can creep up over extended periods of time, then you might be better equipped to do something about it. So did this for years where I'm working basically nonstop. And there were a couple of signals over time. And one of the challenges was because I wasn't doing much else, there wasn't a lot of opportunity for getting these signals that something's off. But before working, while I was in university, I was pretty social. I like to go out, to the bars. I like to go to house parties and stuff like that. I'm introverted, I'm shy, but like if we were going out with friends or whatever, like, yeah, I'm gonna go have fun. It was, I'm sick of being at school for the week. I want to go have fun with my friends. Like, absolutely, I look forward to the weekends and just going out. And what I was doing was just work after I graduated. So what I started to notice is that when those types of things would happen, suddenly I was having challenges. Suddenly it was like, I don't really know if I want to go out because it's a little awkward. I'm around these other people, like, and it's not the work people, because in the beginning it was fine. I'd be going out with work people and it was great. But it started to be like going out, meeting new people was awkward. And I noticed this in particular in situations where I should be extremely comfortable. So some of my best friends from high school, for example, would be like, hey, it's been a while. We're going to go meet up at so-and-so's house. There's going to be some other people there. And I just remember this feeling of like, nope, not me, not going to that. Why? Why do I not want to go see my best friends? Why would I not want to do that? And that's when I started to notice, uh-oh, I think Kelly was right. And I think Kelly was right because I was experiencing burnout, but it looked different. It wasn't, oh, I'm disengaged with work. I'm not irate. I feel accomplished. I feel appreciated, all these things. But the burnout for me was that I don't have a good way to explain this. I'm going to try my best. It was like, you need, if you're experiencing burnout, if you can draw, it's going to sound kind of like woo woo, I guess, but if I can draw energy from other places, then I can, stick to what I'm doing. And because I wasn't doing a whole lot except like going to the gym and working, there's not, I basically was able to tap into all my other time of the day to do something I loved. But what I wasn't doing was spending time with friends. I wasn't spending time with family. I wasn't spending time on my other hobbies. I even stopped playing video games because I thought, I don't need to play video games. I can just work and get more done. I like working. For me, burnout was different because I replaced all of the other things in my life except the gym. I was sacrificing sleep without even knowing it, right? Like, I'll touch on this in just a moment about my sleep patterns, but I gave up all these other things so I could work more. But that only goes so long. For me, it was years, which is great. But then I reached this point where I'm going, oh crap. I have like extreme social anxiety now. I have nothing else to tap into. So if work keeps if I keep doing what I'm doing with work, I'm going to reach a point where, like, I'm already lacking, like, I don't have any social skills anymore. I'm awkward around people. What else? Like, I don't have anything else to give up. Like, my health. And this is where the sleep part's going to come in. I didn't realize this. This is kind of weird, but I don't like coffee, but I love caffeine. And so if anyone who knows me personally is watching this stream, they'll know all about this. I go to the gym. I don't like coffee, and I love caffeine. People who go to the gym are very much into pre-workout, right? A lot of people are. You go buy pre-workout, you get caffeine in it, get all the energy you need. Except for me, I'm like, well, pre-workout costs a lot of money. So if I just buy caffeine powder in bulk, which is extremely cheap, by the way, I was like, I can have, without exaggerating, like decades worth. I had 20 years worth of caffeine for like $100. I just have caffeine powder. And what I didn't realize I was doing, just staying caffeinated nonstop. People talk about like how much coffee they drink as programmers. I don't drink coffee. I have caffeine powder. And I was having over a gram of caffeine a day for years. I thought, this is the scary part, I thought that I had got up to around 800 milligrams. But then I realized the scoop I was using was not a 200 milligram scoop. It was 300 milligrams. So I was having so much caffeine just to keep me going and thinking nothing of it that I am narcoleptic now. I have my sleep is incredibly unwell. So I am doing like I talk about this in my vlogs that I do every week, but I'm trying to basically not totally stop caffeine because I think there's benefits to it, but I just re-looking at my caffeine intake, and it's extremely difficult because now I have issues where um like I need to nap sometimes multiple times a day and I can fall asleep instantly. So it's not a good spot to be in, but again, going back to burnout, I was trading other parts of my life basically. So my health was actually being affected. I didn't think so. Hey, I go to the gym every day. I eat well, but my sleep has been destroyed. The caffeine intake did not help. But these are things like I wasn't thinking about. And I think that that's important to mention for folks watching this is that going through burnout, now that I've kind of experienced this and also like sort of what I would call traditional burnout is really like you're sacrificing other parts of your life and it's over time. So you're taking the energy that you would be putting into other things that you enjoy, right? In most cases. And now you're giving up the time to do that to work on this project. Or you're putting up with periods of time where you're not feeling like recognized. You feel like you're not making progress. And that's, that's demotivating you over a long period of time, but you're putting up with it. You're kind of putting in more energy to keep going. It's just not sustainable. So you burn out. So for me, I've written posts about this before. Actually, the way that I kind of got or out of my burnout was like I don't know how to stop working because I've been doing it for so long that way that to do less or to do it different would make it seem like I'm like I will have another problem now. I am going to feel unaccomplished if I have to stop working so much. And this is important because it's not a matter of like I'm not saying that I am a better worker than other people. I'm not saying I am better than other people. I'm saying that I might even be worse than other people, but I was working more. So now, if that was one of my strengths that I can work more, what's going to happen when I stop? Right? My sense of value, me being able to have what looks like high throughput because I'm working so much is going to feel diminished. So I have to go, well, how am I going to convince myself to just like this is one of the core parts of my life? Working this company's called Magnet Forensics. Working for Magnet Forensics was my young adult life. And it sounds kind of weird to say, but I love doing it. So, how do I convince myself to work less? So, just reading Maria's comment in the chat here. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing. I notice I tend to have this identification with work, sense of self equals work. Yeah. Putting it first in my life and thinking about it 24/7. How can I bring more value? Yeah. And this is literally how I operated at Magnet Forensics. I never had this problem, call it a problem. I never had this mindset before working at Magnet. Like I said, no one made me do it that way. It was just so motivating to do it. I was actually quite the opposite as an intern, and it's kind of embarrassing to say. Again, I've written about this and it's public, so it's embarrassing to say, but like it's the reality. I was kind of like, I'm going to do the minimum I have to do because like whatever, I want to do other stuff. Like that's just the reality. But after working at Magnet, my work ethic is completely different. So another comment here from YouTube. In the past, when I worked for an amazing big tech company, I thought I should give my maximum all the time. Yeah, but started to notice excessive dedication led me to poor performance due to mental fatigue. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's good for people to hear that. Making assumptions here, right? But probably many years and working in tech, right? If you were working at big tech and kind of doing this for a sustained period of time, like, yeah, So I'll say it again in case folks didn't hear it or they're not reading the chat, but started to notice excessive dedication led me to poor performance due to mental fatigue. Yeah, I think I had been propped up on caffeine in ridiculous amounts to compensate for that. So that's another example of like how, like, what am I giving up to be able to sustain that, right? It's all about sacrificing something here. Okay, so what did I do? Well, I had to do something that would literally force me to be not working. And one way to do that, and I recommend it because it's awesome, is to get a dog. I got my dog Lila. I try not to get emotional. Lila's still with us, so it's not like she's passed away or anything, but like I would say Lila saved my life because Lila forced me to be out of the office at certain times of the day. She's a puppy, right? So you get a puppy, you have to go home to take the dog out for a walk. You have to go get out of the house and do other stuff. So Lila absolutely saved my life. I was able to start, I could go to the dog park. I had something else to socialize about that wasn't just work. So started to build up more of an identity. I started to get into modified cars after that. I don't recommend that for anyone. That's a really bad idea. But that allowed me to go meet other people and socialize and start just building out more of like who I am. But if it wasn't for Lila, I would have kept working until there was more problems. So yeah, Lila's been very impactful for me. I've had her for, I think she's 9 this year, so it's been a little while. So yeah, it didn't take me the full 8 years at Magnet to kind of realize. I think the math is probably around 4 or 5 years at Magnet, I think. But it was years of doing this before I realized there's a problem. And for me, it was Lila was the forcing function to get me out of work some parts of the day, get me out of my home office some parts of the day, and have something else in my life. And so, yeah, I think as we kind of go to the next part of the conversation here, like, what can we do about burnout? So for me, in my situation at that point in time, that's what I did for burnout, was to get a dog. You don't recommend getting into modified cars. Funny. Um, yeah, one sec. This is kind of a fun thing. So I do social media stuff now, obviously, right? I have to cough. One sec. I got a little choked up talking about my dog. Yeah, no, I like modified cars a lot. Do I still have my website? I do. So I'll switch my screen here. Yeah, there's my car. It's no longer purple. It's actually black now, but I do love modified cars. But yeah, I don't recommend anyone does it because it's a big waste of money. That car has been in shops more than it has been on the road, so I do not recommend it to anyone. But that's how it goes. But it was something, like I said, after getting Lila, after starting to kind of rebuild other parts of my life, this was an opportunity for me to start doing other things. And I think that was really important. So what can we do about burnout? And the thing that I mentioned earlier in the conversation, right, was this, the ability to be aware. I think that's the most important part. And, I appreciate my HR leader, Kelly. At the time, like, I was clearly not aware and she was clearly aware. She was very clearly aware because she's awesome with people. And she was doing what she could to let me know, hey, look, this is going to be a problem if you don't do something about it. Of course, she can't force me to do anything about it, but she was being a good person, a good friend, and letting me know, like, hey, watch out. it's gonna get you. So I do appreciate her doing that, but that's why I think one of the first things and the most important things we can do is build awareness. So understanding what burnout can look like, understanding that it can look different for other people, and I think if you have that in place, and this is the case for a lot of things, right? If you don't have awareness about a problem, how can you ever expect to go try to improve the situation? Just like fundamentally, right? I think if you always need to rely on other people to have the awareness, not a good spot to be in, although that's helpful. But you need to build your own awareness for these types of things. And, I'll go back to what Maria said earlier on LinkedIn. It's in the chat. But this idea of like, she's saying, be attentive to the signs. So when she starts to feel exhausted, annoyed, unaccomplished, unappreciated, all these things. If you recall what I said when I was talking about my story, though, this idea that burnout builds up over time. So when you think about awareness and this idea of something happening over prolonged periods of time, it means it's a lot harder to gauge. So you do need to work at trying to build awareness on this. It's not a matter of, hey, today I don't like this project, or today someone left me a code review comment and I didn't think it was nice. I didn't like it. And therefore I'm having a bad day. Now I'm burned out. It doesn't work that way. You can have bad days, and I'm not trying to minimize that. I'm sorry if you're having a bad day. We all have them. But the burnout part happens over prolonged periods of time. And I don't know, I'm not a scientist, and I'm not pretending to be, but like I don't know, I wouldn't say like you must wait at least 3 weeks, therefore it's burnout, but like it will take some amount of time for these types of things to accumulate, and you start realizing like I'm kind of not in a great spot, like mentally, emotionally, and potentially like physically, right? So if I go back to what was said in the chat, give my maximum all the time, but started to notice excessive dedication led me to poor performance due to mental fatigue. Again, I'm making assumptions about this comment, but it probably wasn't like right away, like, oh, like, yeah, I was kind of struggling through that project that was a month long, and that's got to be because I'm burnt out from giving my all. Like, it was probably over longer periods of time, even in that situation. So if we start to build awareness, like, how do we go about doing that? And this, I'm not going to prescribe anything for everyone, right? Like, I said this at the beginning, this type of thing is going to be situational. I do think it's important to have periods of time for yourself when you can reflect on how you're doing. You can kind of treat your life like agile. No, but like if you think about continuous improvement and that kind of stuff, you can apply those concepts to yourself, right? Like, when's the last time you sat down and just like reflected on how things were going, on your mental state, your emotional state? For some people, it might not have been that long ago. For other people, you might be like, that sounds stupid, Nick. Like, I've never done that. I mean, maybe try it. I honestly can't tell you when the last time I've done it for myself is. And so this is a good reminder for me as I'm talking to all of you about this. Like, I'm probably due for a nice, honest conversation with myself. I'm probably due for saying, hey, maybe I shouldn't wait until I can't remember the last time to do something like this, because I think it's important. Actually, um, no, this is another good story, and I'll keep this one brief. But uh, I, for different reasons, not because I gave you my story about burnout and how it looked different, but um, I switched teams at Microsoft earlier this year, and this was a bit unexpected for me. I wasn't actively looking um, for a team, but it was far too coincidental to turn down the offer to at least apply. And this was a situation where I was starting to realize, maybe a little bit, I don't want to say too late because it worked out perfectly, just very coincidental. Um, I've told this story in a couple of different forums, but um, I loved working on the deployment team. I thought it was great. I worked with great people. I liked the space we're in. But I remember saying to my wife one morning, something along the lines of like where some of the gaps were for me. Like I'm starting to realize like this isn't really. I'm not feeling accomplished. Right, going using Maria's words. I don't know if I would say I wasn't feeling appreciated. I feel like in some aspects yes, and some aspects no. But was kind of feeling like, hey, like I feel like I've been doing what I should be doing for like 3 years now, and it's kind of like it's just not. I'm realizing it. Maybe it's not really there for me, which is interesting, right? Like I wasn't actively reflecting on this; it just kind of came up, and I told my wife that in the morning, and that same afternoon, I had a meeting where my current manager talked to me about how they were looking for to hire managers into the team. So there was an opportunity. I still had to go apply and everything, and so that's it's not like I just walked into a job and it was like here you go, but it was like hey, like we are looking, and are you interested? And I just remember thinking like I just had this conversation this morning. I'm very conservative when it comes to jobs and things like that. Like I probably, knowing myself, I probably would have waited until it was a problem, until I was burning out. I was just starting to have awareness of it. And I just remember being like, I mean, it sounds like an awesome space. So I'm like, yeah, like I think I do want to, apply for this. So, but it was coincidental. So that was the last time I had a little bit of reflection for myself. And I think that I should do a better job of that going forward so that I'm not in a bad spot. So that's the first recommendation, or maybe two-parter, right? Awareness, and then how can you have awareness? Well, maybe building in some type of um, periodic check that you can have with yourself. Even if it seems silly, you're like, this seems dumb, I don't want to waste the time doing it. I don't know, like it doesn't take long. You're just doing it with yourself, right? You can sit down, you can write some notes. I would probably recommend writing it on paper just so that you're like actively doing something. Um, so another comment in the chat here. So notice my performance was being affected after working on the same project for 1 year. It was also my first job in tech. Yeah. Recently, the last team I was on, I had an employee that was on a project for over a year, and um, there's a lot of small pieces that go into this project, and I had conversations with him throughout the year, being like, hey, like I have I have awareness for better awareness for other people. Like I want to make sure that this is still engaging work, it's still challenging, you still want to be on it. Um, Otherwise, like we can pivot. I have to sneeze. Why do I have to sneeze? Come on. Okay, it's gone. It's gonna sneak up on me, just like burnout. Um, but no, like in all seriousness, it was like, hey, how do we make this? Like, do we need to pivot? Do you want to keep going? And we ended up finding other well, I'm gonna call it exciting ways. We found like um, different spins or different changes we can make within the project that would kind of breathe more life into it. But honestly, if I reflect, even for that individual, that was probably too long. But I do think that there was a lot of interesting growth opportunities. So he probably stuck it out, um, and he did an amazing job on it. So I'm very proud of him. But yeah, that was like trying to have awareness for someone else. Like, hey, you're on this for a while. So if you're thinking like time frame wise, like there's a couple examples of being around a year. The first one I gave was multiple years. I don't think the minimum is a year. Like I said, I don't know what the minimum is, but some amount of time. It could be, it could be a couple months or even a month. I don't know. It's going to be different for everyone. Awareness, building in some type of checkpoint with yourself, maybe write it down, journal. I think these are really important. Now, how do we start taking action, right? So now you go, oh, crap. Yeah, this is the burnout they told me about, right? Or like you're starting to realize, hey, like this kind of feels like all those things I was hearing about. if there are people that are active in the chat, if you've experienced burnout and you don't mind sharing what changed, I would love to hear that. I think other people would love to hear examples of that. Obviously, no pressure. First of all, I can't make anyone put anything in the chat. Second of all, I understand that that's like a personal thing, but I think there can be a lot of value in sharing that kind of stuff from other people as well. So if you are comfortable sharing that kind of thing, I think that would be totally cool if you're open to it. Um, okay, so if we think about things we can do, so we have some awareness. Also, if people are putting stuff in the chat, I'll try to read it out, right? So you start to become aware. I'm experiencing burnout, I think. So probably something needs to change. What's it going to be? And at the beginning of this stream, I said there's going to be a lot of situational things going on. Okay, so let's take a couple of examples because maybe there's going to be some themes that come up. So you're experiencing burnout at work, and let's take the example that came up in chat. You're on a project. It's a year long, right? And maybe you knew it was going to be a year, maybe you thought it was going to be a little shorter, who knows, right? But you're on it, say it's been about a year, exact time frame's not important. And you're going like, I don't know, like I've identified like I'm starting to feel burnt out on this. I need to do something. Um, what I might recommend as a first step is being open and honest with your manager. This is going to be situational again. Some people listening to this would be like, Nick, that's so stupid. My manager would fire me or something. I mean, there's probably some other problems going on if that's what your manager's like. I think having an open, honest conversation saying like, hey, I'm starting to realize that, like, I feel like my own performance isn't where I want it to be. I'm starting to be disengaged. I think if you can be open about that stuff before you have someone else telling you about it, it's probably better, in my honest opinion. Now, that doesn't solve the problem, but I think it starts working towards a solution because if your manager has awareness and they're, in my opinion, a good manager willing to work with you on this kind of stuff, they can say, hey, well, how can I support this person in their role? They've been responsible for this project. Is there someone else also on the project? They can maybe step in a little bit more and we can phase this person out into a different project. There's a lot of different options that an engineering manager could consider if you give them some awareness, right? Um, I know for some people, you'll be thinking like, well, sounds like a sign of weakness. You can't even finish the project you started or whatever. But, we're human. Working on a project for a year, that's a long time. On the same thing, that's a long time. Especially if you're feeling burnt out, you're feeling like you're disengaged. As an engineering manager, I would much rather find someone who is more motivated and engaged to get them onto that work and get the person who's disengaged onto some other business priority that they might be excited about. Sorry, there's a message on Instagram. What is that one factor which you believe made you you and helped to be ahead of the rest? That's a good question. I don't think that I am special. I've been doing this for a while, I guess. That's all. Nothing special in that regard. I don't think I have any weird skill set that other people don't have. Um, I don't know. I try to push through being introverted and try to balance my people skills with technical skills, but that's not unique. It's something I do. Other people do it too. Okay, so there's one example of you're working on a project for a while. Talk to your manager about it, right? I think that's important. Um, this other aspect of giving your maximum all the time. This kind of ties into what I was saying from my own experience is finding ways that you can. It's hard depending on your personality traits and stuff, right? But like I had to find a way that forced me out of doing work and giving my maximum all the time. I needed a forcing function to set those boundaries. That's not going to be the same for everyone. Your forcing function, if you need one, might not be to get a puppy. Um, but I think you need to try and find ways if you're like, I keep putting in more time, right? Trying to find ways to step back You need to be able to think about what are the things you need to prioritize. For me, I didn't have other things I was aware of to prioritize. Now, like a good example now is like, so I do a lot of stuff with content creation. I still work my 9 to 5. I tried writing up to 7 blog articles per week and doing my videos and stuff this year. I can't keep up with it. It's not sustainable. And one of the, forcing functions for me is I'm married. I have a wife. I am already doing this kind of stuff a lot, but I like there's a limit where I'm like, if I do more, then I'm giving up that aspect of my life, and that's not okay. So a little bit more awareness now. Just reading more comments regarding this project thing. Good advice to hear. Going to consider as I come up on working my current project for a year. Yep. After some time, I started noticing that doing unproductive things, yeah, contributed to increasing my performance, even though this seems contradictory. That's an interesting one. That doing unproductive things contributed to increasing my performance. I wonder if the unproductive things were from your own perspective, but they truly were. Oh, sorry, I'm getting this now. Doing unproductive things. For me, unproductive things are playing video games. Right? You need a break. You need a break. It's unproductive, but it's still in the long run, like finding something where you can relax, disconnect. I think that's what this person was getting at. Sorry if I misinterpreted your comment. Another comment here: curiosity and interest drives a lot of success in the engineering field. Yep, communication and relationships. Figure out where you can succeed. I fortunately have zero other life responsibilities, so can't weigh on a work-life balance, but kudos to you for prioritizing. Well, so on Twitch here, this is similar to what I was saying in my own experiences, right? So, yeah, if you have no other life responsibilities, great. There's a lot of flexibility, but try to get this awareness early, right? I don't think that, and I want to be clear about this, right? I don't regret what I did. I don't regret working as much as I did. Could I have done? Could I have had more balance? Sure, but I don't regret it. Um, like I regret some timing things. Like that company went public after I left. That company went back to private. They were bought for $2 billion. Like, I think in the end, I think in the end it worked. Um, and I'm alive and I'm healthy and I've learned a lot. So like I don't have regrets about it. So I think in startups a lot of the time, especially the startup had no funding. It was just profitable. So no external investors. I think that in startup land, like, stereotypically you'll hear people like working all the time. I think that for startups to succeed, there's some amount of that has to happen. I'm not saying every single one's the same, but for a lot of them, like you kind of need to have like that bit of extra, crazy drive. But yeah, I think try to understand that balance and identifying stuff early while you can. Also, it's common to go through periods where you lack interest in what you're doing. Yes, 100%. It's 100% okay. But find what you like working on. Yes. And that's such a critical thing to emphasize, because I think that a lot of people, especially trying to get into software engineering, right? See a lot of this because there's a lot of people that will message or comment, and they're trying to get into software engineering, and I think it's a great field to be in. And I know that a lot of people are incentivized by compensation for it because being in tech pays well. Like there's nothing wrong with that, but I think when it comes to life fulfillment, like yes, money is good. Being able to support yourself, your family, feeling like you have safety in that regard and your finance is important. Making more money feels better, but beyond a certain point, if you're just trading, you're literally giving up portions of your life just to say number in bank go up. Like I have it tattooed. Oh, it's blocked out. This tattoo on my arm, I can't turn my forearm the right way. This is so awkward. But there's how do I do this? It's weird. there's a tattoo on my forearm that's an hourglass, and it has money going into, like, in the top of the hourglass is money. I have another tattoo on this side, which is an hourglass, and the left side has money in the top of the hourglass pouring into a bottomless pit. And I got that tattoo to remind myself, like, if you're just living life to make a number in a bank account go up and you don't love what you're doing, like, you're probably going to be the person when they get to the end of their life going, man, I have so many regrets. Because what number go up? Like, are you truly happy? You can't go back and change it. So yes, like, being able to support yourself, being able to have, a certain degree of financial freedom, I think that's important because it helps us feel like we can have more freedom in the choices and stuff we want to do in life. But beyond a certain point, if you're making more money and you're not having those life freedoms that you want, then it's not worth it. So just reading more in the chat, games, traveling to the beach, shopping, watching comedy shows on the TV, and simply doing nothing worked for me also. Yeah, these are great, right? My boss also helped me a lot. I'm glad to hear that. So, and sometimes it's really good to hear this kind of stuff from other people, because a little bit earlier I was saying, hey, like, tell your manager, like, have a conversation with them, right? I think that that's important. You want to be able to have a good trust relationship with your manager. They should be, if they're a good manager in that role, they want to help you succeed. You should be able to have that kind of conversation. So I'm very glad that you can share that, like, your manager helped a lot. That's awesome. So Cameron in the chat says, I'm in the opposite situation. I feel I prioritize my work-life balance too much. Only 2 years into the field, maybe my career won't become as great as it could be if I worked harder and or longer. Well, yeah, so this is a balance thing, right? And it's impossible. Like, I kind of made a joke at the beginning of this stream at some point where I said, hey, like, we don't have a crystal ball. But there's ways to have more impact without necessarily just working more and more. Or you could go through periods where you say, hey, I am going to work more. I'm consciously making a decision. I will put in more time, more effort, depending on what that looks like, to try and get a little bit more ahead in some capacity, right? Depending on what that looks like for you, you might consciously make that decision. Now, for me, and I can only really speak from my own experiences. I remember the feeling of, like, when I'm at this startup that I was at before Microsoft, I remember feeling like I love the work I'm doing, so that's a good thing. I don't feel like I'm, someone's forcing me to do something I hate. Like, that just never happened. So love what I was doing, and it honestly felt like I talked about how I felt like my manager at the time, actually, like the CTO, right? So the owner, the founder, he's a CTO. What he did really well was that he just had a lot of trust and gave us a lot of autonomy. So it felt like I know it's not my company, obviously. I would not be having to work ever again if it was my company. It's not my company. But because I have so much autonomy, it felt like the feeling I had was like, this is mine to make successful, right? If I put in more, success goes up. That's the feeling I had. And for me, that's a powerful position to be in because it's so motivating. You get so much engagement from it. It's quite the opposite when you're in a position where you're like, it doesn't matter if I put in more time, more effort, like whatever more means to you. It doesn't matter if I put in more because what changes, right? That's a crappy spot to be in. And you can, like, I was working for someone else and I still had that feeling of like, if I put in more, there's more success that comes out of this. And if we go back to what, again, Maria said this way earlier in the chat, being like feeling appreciated, feeling accomplished. Like I had those things. So for Cameron in the chat here, if you're feeling appreciated, if you're feeling like you're accomplished, maybe there is no issue. Maybe that's totally fine. Maybe that's a great spot to be in. But, if you're still young, you're 2 years into the field, I don't I don't think there's anything wrong with trying things out, right? If you're like, hey, maybe give it a time box or something. I don't know, but if you might approach how you work a little bit differently, maybe you're like, I am going to see, maybe I will put in a little bit more time, effort. Again, I don't know what more means for you in this context, but you could try it out, right? If you're going through this and you're having awareness about what it means to burn out, what things you might be giving up, you could go try it out and see, like, you know what, this felt rewarding for me to do that. I do feel better off. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about it, but you know, it's your career and your life to try things out. So you know, flexibility. So yeah, and then added into I was on a little bit of a ramble there, but also keep in mind early in your career, just reading in the chat, right? You may need to make some sacrifices, build the life you want. Yeah, this person said it in one sentence, and it took me 5 minutes of dancing around it to have a very nice sentence like that. So thank you for adding that in the chat. I think that's exactly right. Right. You can try these things out. You can build the life you want. I think that's a great way to put it. So I do appreciate that. Thanks for adding that. Okay, what are other things we can try looking at when it comes to burnout? I hope I haven't been saying imposter syndrome this whole time. I almost just said it and I caught myself. So that's the crappy thing about live streaming is I don't know how much I'm messing up. People are watching this being like, this idiot. But that's okay. No regrets, right? So what else can we do about burnout? Well, we talked about if you're working on projects too long. We talked about are you overcommitting yourself? What else can we maybe do when it comes to burnout? You could maybe, again, if we're the baseline was start to have some awareness, right? You might be able to, if you have a partner at home or even friends, if you're early in your career and so maybe you have roommates and stuff like that. I don't know, like you could have conversations with them, right? Are they noticing that once you started a new job, a new project, are they noticing that your behavior is changing? Right? You could have conversations with people to try and drive up that awareness, be more in tune with it. I think that's important. So you can leverage, like, I think it's important you build up your own awareness. But if you're kind of like, I'm not really sure, I don't know if I'm experiencing burnout right now, maybe you could talk with someone about it, right? They can help be a bit of a, I don't know, like a measuring stick for you, so to speak. Like they can give you some insight that maybe you don't have for yourself yet. That might be beneficial. You could, again, if you're in a good spot, a good working relationship with your manager, you could bring that up with them. Say, hey, I've been thinking about this. Do you have any thoughts? Like, could we talk through this and see? Maybe if you've worked with them for a while, they might notice these things already, right? We kind of saw it in the chat. I was, overcommitting myself and my performance was degrading. Well, if your performance is degrading, if you have any type of like feedback from your manager, whether it's through compensation or something else, they're probably noticing it. That's why your measured performance is degrading, right? So it might be worth having a conversation with them, start things off. But that might be a good starting point for folks. Like I said, once you have the awareness, it's going to be very situational. So you want to reflect on the primary things that are causing the burnout or the symptoms of the burnout, I should say, and see if there's initial things that you can start to work on that help with those. So if you're kind of acknowledging, I think I'm going through burnout and something's got to change. What are the biggest factors for you in that dissatisfaction? right? So to give you an example, for me, what it was not was, oh man, I wish I had more time for other things. I didn't have other things, right? So not an issue. Nowadays, like, so I'll give you a couple more examples. I kind of mentioned with content creation, work, we got other stuff going on in life. I have a wife, we got 3 dogs. We love our dogs. Um, I do have other time commitments that I need to keep in mind. So as I'm doing other stuff, I have started to notice, like when I was trying to write a blog article per day, plus work, plus the newsletter, plus the YouTube videos, plus actually engaging on social media, I'm like, okay, like I don't have the time for this. It's too much of a time commitment. I need time back. So again, having the awareness affords you, when you start to feel burnout, you can reflect on it and say, like, what's the most critical thing that's kind of getting in the way here? If you're noticing the biggest thing, like as you're experiencing burnout, is you're just like, I'm really disinterested in this. If you express that to your manager, they might be able to help align another project that you are more interested in. So I think I'm biased, of course, as an engineering manager. These are the types of conversations that if my employees approached me, I would absolutely be like very happy to talk through how we could improve that for them. And I would not be sitting there going, oh man, like this person, here they are just whining about work. Like, not like that at all. It would very much be like, first of all, I'm happy that they could make the time and they have the trust to be able to tell me about this. I think that's awesome. I don't think it's easy. I think it's awesome they could do it. Second of all, I think it's my job and my responsibility to be able to help them with these things. So I'm happy to do it. But I think that might be it, folks. As I get ready to sign off here, just the last opportunity. If anyone has questions, thoughts, happy to answer any last minute things here. I know there's a bit of a delay, so I like to just ramble a little bit to make sure that if people want to type anything, that by the time the delay works both ways, that I can read your messages and stuff. But yeah, I will mention that I do this every Monday at 9:30 p.m. PST. I know I've seen Maria on a couple of times. I've actually done a live stream with Maria. We've done a recorded YouTube video as well. She's great. But yeah, I'm trying to do these every Monday, 9:30 p.m. PST. So we'll remind you that, like, if you want to see next week's live stream, if you have questions that you want answered on the live stream, you can message me. You're welcome, Cameron. No problem. Is that the same Cameron from YouTube as well? Is that 2 Camerons or 1 Cameron in 2 spots? Will we ever know? But yeah, I do this every Monday and I rotate the topic. I don't code on these Monday live streams. I like making them more general about software engineering, but I have been trying to code. Again, it's a time commitment thing. I have been trying to code throughout the week. Sometimes it's early in the morning, my time, and walk through code. On Instagram, really great explanation. Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed that. So I hope that helped. Oh, yes, I switched. Okay, so it is just 1 Cameron, not in 2 spots at the same time. He just moved. So I'll be able to sleep at night knowing that at least it's not multi-location Cameron. Okay, folks. Well, thanks for joining. I do appreciate all the support in the chat and stuff. Like I say, like I do these for you guys. So I'm happy that you can engage and get your stuff answered and share, because again, I have one set of experiences that I can share with all of you. My experiences are not, a rule. It's not universal. And if you guys can share your own experiences in the chat and stuff, it's so helpful for other people to see different examples of things. So thank you once again. I appreciate it. Hopefully you can join next Monday, 9:30 p.m. PST. And I'll see you then. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your week.